I'm 73. Linda asked me to move a heavy ceramic planter off the back porch last October, and for a second I honestly did not know if my legs were going to let me do it. The pot was full of wet dirt and dead geraniums from the summer, and when I bent down and gripped the edges, my thighs just felt hollow. There was no push. There was no drive. I had to brace my shoulder against the brick wall of the house just to get the leverage I needed to stand back up. I got the pot moved, but I sat down on the patio chair afterward and just stared at my own knees, wondering where the strength had gone. I stood there with my hands resting on the cold rim of that heavy pot, feeling a deep, quiet tremble in my muscles. It was a silent moment, just me and the autumn wind in the backyard, but it felt like a warning bell ringing in my own head. That was the exact second I stopped pretending I was fine and admitted to myself that my body was quietly slipping away from me. For over 30 years, I worked on the concrete floors of a distribution warehouse. I moved pallets. I climbed metal stairs. I carried boxes that weighed 50 pounds without even thinking about breathing hard. My legs were my tools. I relied on them the way a carpenter relies on a good hammer. When you retire, you think the tools are just going to stay sharp, sitting in the shed. You do not realize that rust sets in faster than you can see it. I thought my legs were just getting a little older, a little tired. I did not want to admit that they were actually shrinking. My daughter Megan came over a few days after the incident with the planter. She works as an occupational therapist, and she spends her days watching older folks try to navigate their own homes after their bodies start betraying them. I made the mistake of mentioning how heavy that pot felt. She did not coddle me. She sat down at the kitchen table, looked me right in the eye, and told me about a medical paper she had just finished reading. It tracked men in their late 60s and early 70s, and it found that we can lose a massive percentage of our muscle mass every single decade if we do not actively fight it. She told me that over 70% of men my age are living with severe muscle loss and do not even realize it until they take a bad fall. I listened to her, and the numbers felt like a cold bucket of water over my head. I spent the next 2 months treating my own body like a broken engine that I needed to diagnose. I started paying attention to every habit, every movement, and especially every single thing I put on my plate. I realized that the way I was eating was actively starving the muscle right off my bones. I narrowed the problem down to 4 specific things. 3 of them were massive mistakes I was making every single day because I believed the lies we are all told about getting older. The 4th thing was the single food I started eating every morning that finally stopped the weakness and put the armor back on my legs. I am going to tell you what all 4 of these things are, because nobody warns you about the mistakes until the damage is already done. We have to talk about the lies first, because you cannot build a strong house on a rotten foundation. The first mistake I had to fix was the idea that an older man should eat a light breakfast. I do not know when I started believing this, but somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that because I was not going to the warehouse anymore, I did not need a real meal in the morning. For years, I started my day with 2 pieces of dry toast and a big mug of black coffee. I thought I was keeping my weight down. I thought I was giving my heart a break. What I was actually doing was sending my body into a panic. When you wake up in the morning, your body has been running on empty for 8 or 10 hours. If you are 73 years old and you only give your stomach a piece of bread and some coffee, your body still needs fuel to keep your heart beating and your lungs pumping, so it goes looking for it. And the first place it goes to steal that fuel is your muscle tissue. I was literally forcing my body to eat my own legs just to get through the morning. Megan explained the math to me. She told me about a long-term study that followed older adults who ate light, carbohydrate-heavy breakfast compared to those who ate heavy, dense protein first thing in the morning. The group eating the light breakfast lost their lean muscle mass more than twice as fast over a 5-year period. Their bodies were constantly breaking down muscle tissue for energy. When I heard that, I pictured a man tearing the wooden siding off his own house just to keep the fireplace burning. That is exactly what I was doing to my legs. It made me think of my old neighbor, Arthur. Arthur is 75 now. About 3 years ago, he decided he needed to eat healthier, so he started having nothing but a small bowl of plain oatmeal for breakfast. He lost about 15 pounds, and he was proud of it for a while, but it was not fat that he lost. His legs got so thin they looked like sticks inside his trousers. Last summer, he had to hire a kid from down the street to push his lawnmower because he no longer had the leg drive to push it up the small slope in his front yard. His light breakfast cost him his pride and his yard. I knew I had to stop eating like a bird immediately. The second mistake was believing that plant-based foods were enough to keep an aging man strong. Linda means well. She really does. She watches the morning shows, and she started bringing home almond milk and these little vegetable patties, telling me it was better for our cholesterol. I went along with it. I figured protein was just protein. I figured if it came from a plant or a bean, it would do the exact same job in my body. I was dead wrong. An older body is stubborn. It is not like a 20-year-old body that will build muscle out of cheap pizza and bad sleep. An older engine needs a very specific, powerful spark to turn the ignition and tell the muscles to grow. That spark is a specific amino acid called leucine. Plant protein barely has any of it. When you only eat plant protein, you are putting gas in the tank, but you do not have the keys to start the car. The fuel just sits there, and the muscle continues to waste away. I found a research paper that looked at men over 65 who were given plant protein versus men who were given dense animal protein. The men eating the plant protein continued to lose strength. Their muscles simply did not respond. The men eating the animal protein actually triggered new muscle growth. Their bodies recognized the heavy, complete protein and used it to rebuild the damaged fibers. I was eating Linda's vegetable patties and wondering why my thighs burned when I walked up the stairs. I was giving my body weak materials and expecting it to build a strong wall. My brother-in-law Robert fell into this trap. Robert is 71 and he went entirely plant-based about 4 years ago after a minor health scare. He thought he was extending his life, but I watched his physical presence just evaporate. He used to have a handshake that could crush rocks. Last Thanksgiving, he asked me to open a jar of cranberry sauce for him because his grip strength was completely gone. His forearms looked hollow. He saved his heart maybe, but he traded away his physical capability to do it. I realized I could not afford to make that trade. The third mistake was skipping meals. When I worked at the warehouse, I used to skip lunch all the time because I was too busy checking manifests on the loading dock. I carried that bad habit into my retirement. I would get busy in the garage fixing something, look at the clock, realize it was 2 in the afternoon, and figure I would just wait until dinner. I thought I was being tough. I thought I was proving that I did not need to be babied with 3 square meals a day. What nobody tells you is that an older body cannot store protein for later. You either use it or you lose it. If you go 12 or 14 hours without giving your body a fresh supply of building blocks, the construction site shuts down. The workers pack up and go home. And worse, the demolition crew shows up. Every time I skipped lunch, I was opening the door for muscle loss. I read about a clinical trial where they took men my age and gave them the exact same amount of food every day. But one group ate it all in 1 or 2 big meals, and the other group spread it out evenly every few hours. The guys who spread it out maintained their leg strength. The guys who skipped meals and ate huge dinners lost muscle mass in their legs every single month. The body needs a steady, constant supply of materials. You cannot pour all the concrete at once and expect the driveway to cure properly. A guy from my old church, a retired mechanic named William, used to brag about this. He would proudly tell anyone who listened that he only ate 1 meal a day at 6 in the evening. He thought it kept him sharp. Last winter, William stepped out onto his front porch to get the mail. His legs simply gave out under him, and he went down hard on the concrete. He did not trip. He did not slip on ice. His leg just failed. The muscle had nothing left in the tank to hold him up. That was the moment I stopped skipping lunch entirely. But fixing the mistakes does not put the muscle back. Stopping the bleeding does not heal the wound. I knew what not to do, but I still had to figure out what my legs actually needed to rebuild the strength I had lost. I had to find the right material. I threw out the dry toast. I pushed the vegetable patties to the back of the freezer. I stopped looking at the clock and trying to be tough. And I started doing one very simple, incredibly powerful thing every single morning of my life. I started eating eggs, but not just a polite little egg white scramble. 3 whole eggs every single morning, cooked in real butter. I know what the doctors used to say. I know we spent 30 years being terrified of the yolk, but I went looking for the actual truth, and what I found changed everything for me. Eggs are the single most perfect source of protein for an aging human body. They contain every single amino acid we need in the exact perfect proportion to force older muscles to stop shrinking and start growing again. And the yolk is the most important part. The yolk carries the healthy fats and the cholesterol that an older man's body desperately needs to produce the hormones that maintain physical strength. I read a study from a major university that looked specifically at older men lifting weights and eating eggs. They had one group eat only the egg whites, and the other group eat the whole eggs, yolks, and all. The men who ate the whole eggs had a 40% higher rate of muscle protein synthesis. 40%. Their bodies were grabbing that dense, rich nutrient profile and aggressively repairing the muscle fibers in their legs. The egg white group barely saw a benefit. I was absolutely floored. We had been throwing away the medicine and eating the cardboard. I did not wait around. The very next morning, I cracked 3 whole eggs into a cast iron skillet. I ate them with a piece of heavy, dense meat. I did it the next day and the day after that. I stopped worrying about the old advice that made us weak and started feeding my body the raw, heavy fuel it was begging for. The change was not a miracle. Muscle does not come back overnight. But about 5 weeks after I started eating those 3 whole eggs every morning, I was out in the garage with my son Derek. We were cleaning out some old boxes of heavy iron tools that belonged to my father. I walked over to a wooden crate, bent down, grabbed the handles, and stood straight up. I did not have to brace myself. I did not have to grab my knees. My thighs just fired, the muscle tightened, and I lifted the weight. Derek was holding a wrench, and he stopped and looked at me. He said I was moving the way I used to move a decade ago on the loading dock. I did not say much, but I felt a quiet, deep sense of relief settle in my chest. The hollow feeling in my legs was gone. The strength was back. The armor was holding. If the legs go, the freedom goes with it. That is the only truth that matters when you get to be my age. Muscle does not vanish because of the calendar. It goes when you stop giving it a reason to stay, and it goes when you starve it of the one specific fuel it needs to survive. You do not have to watch your strength slip away. You do not have to accept that your world is going to get smaller and your chairs are going to get harder to get out of. You just have to be willing to look at your plate and make a change. I'm going to head back into the kitchen now. The cast iron skillet is already on the stove, and Linda is waiting for me to make breakfast. Do not let your legs go quietly. Take care of your body, feed it what it actually needs, and do not let anybody tell you that weakness is just part of the deal. I will be right here if you want to talk again.